If I spend the reserve there, what do I leave naked? I asked. Halden looked at the line we were already losing. Before dawn, 2 reconnaissance aircraft had to be airborne, and Emil was giving us the kind of attack every commander wants to answer fast. I held our last mobile option back anyway. We lost ground for it. The harder question was why Emil's unused force still hadn't moved. The next impact punched grit off the concrete lip in front of us. Halden ducked once, not dramatically, then leaned back toward the radio handset as 2 voices talked over each other in his ear. North edge is folding. I heard it. They want the reserve. Halden looked at me. So do I. Another burst of pressure rolled across the hardpoint. Men shifted behind broken cover, shoulders low, dragging themselves into a line that was already too thin. If you send it now, you get one answer, I said. And if I don't? You keep one choice. That's not the same as keeping ground. No. He watched the north edge disappear behind dust and concrete fragments. Then, I'm paying for the choice. I nodded. He did not make me justify it again. The reserve stayed where it was. That decision immediately made everything harder. The outer position gave way in pieces, not all at once. A pair of defenders fell back across open pavement, while another group covered their movement from a fractured wall. I could hear Halden shifting people elsewhere at the same time, refusing to empty one side merely to save another. Second section, hold the inner corner. A reply snapped back, clipped by interference. Do not chase them. Hold what you still own. That was Halden's strength. He did not confuse movement with recovery. I moved closer to the hard point and felt the next concussion through my knees. Emil's people were not probing. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. They were spending force there. Every push cost them time and bodies, and they kept making it anyway. A defender beside me shouted, "We can still hit them back." "We can hit what they're showing us," I said. He stared at me through the dust. "That's not the same thing." Halden caught the last part. "You have something better." "No, I have a reason not to spend the last mobile piece yet. That reason being, the force he hasn't used. You don't know what it's for." "I know it's still unused." He gave me a hard look, but there was no contempt in it. "Then tell me what I lose while you wait is less than #0. 4# is greater than the north edge, maybe the service cut behind it. And if you're wrong, then we lose it for nothing." He turned back to the radio. "North edge is gone. Fall to the inner markers. Nobody goes back for it." The order landed harder than the incoming fire. We gave up the ground. I watched our line shorten and thicken around the surviving hardpoint positions. It was uglier, but it was still a line. The last mobile option remained uncommitted behind us, untouched, and therefore still useful for something we did not yet understand. Emil did not reward the decision by revealing his hand. His visible force kept hammering the hardpoint. No sudden turn came from the unused wing. No rush toward the ground we had surrendered. No obvious exploitation that made me look clever. Just pressure. Halden came beside me again. "You bought your choice. With your ground." "With my ground," he corrected. I accepted that. A runner reached us from the inner line, breathing hard. "They're asking whether to pull farther back." Halden answered first. "Not yet. The corner is taking fire from 2 directions." "I know. Tell them the line ends where I marked it." The runner looked at me. "It did," I said. "That doesn't make the other choice free." He left. Halden kept his eyes on the hardpoint. "You still want the reserve untouched?" "Yes. Even now." "Yes. What are you waiting to see?" I watched Emil's pressure build again against the same frontage. "Whether he needs us to move more than he needs that ground." Halden glanced at me. "That's a suspicion." "It is." "Then don't sell it as anything else." "I won't." Another impact shook dust from the wall. The reserve was still thin. Our space was smaller. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than the hardpoint was still taking the weight of Emil's attack. And the force he had not used was still somewhere out there, doing nothing I could explain. The shortened line started failing before the dust from the last assault had settled. We had less ground to lose now, which made every step backward more expensive. The inner corner Halden had ordered held took the next wave first. Men who had been spread across the outer position were suddenly shoulder to shoulder behind concrete that had never been meant to carry that much pressure. "Left side is slipping," someone shouted. "I see it." A man near the corner started to move toward the rear. "Not straight back," I told him. "You'll pull the next pair with you." He stopped long enough to look at me. "Then where?" "Across. Keep the line connected." He moved. 2 others followed, not because I had given them a perfect answer, but because it gave them somewhere to go that did not tear the defense in half. The next concussion flattened sound into a dull ring. I felt the concrete through one palm as I lowered myself, then came up moving with the men on the inner side. Halden's voice broke through the noise from farther down the line. "June, I'm tied up on the west side. I've got this corner." "You've got the corner, not the field." I know. He was not handing me his battle. He was giving me room to keep one part of it from collapsing while he dealt with another. "Pressure's building again," the defender said. "I know. Same place. For the moment. And if it shifts, we shift before it cuts us apart." He swallowed, breathing hard. "That sounds simple." "It isn't." "Good. I thought I was missing something." "You're not." Halden broke in. "June, I need the corner alive, not pretty. That's what you're getting." "Then keep giving me that." The pressure tightened. A hostile group kept driving against the same section, forcing us inward by small, ugly amounts. I watched our spacing rather than the people coming at us. The danger was not one more step backward. It was letting each retreat become a separate decision until the line stopped being a line. "Hold there." "We can't hold there." "You don't have to hold forever." The defender beside me stared. "Then what are we doing?" "Staying connected." Another impact cut the exchange short. "Sideways first," I said, "is less than #0. 4# is greater than then back. Keep the corner tied to the people behind us. Do not chase the pavement we already lost." A defender glanced toward the outer ground. "We just leave it. We leave it until taking it back costs less than losing the line." He nodded and moved. "They're still fixed on us," the defender said. "Not for long," I answered. Then it changed. Not gradually. One element that had been hammering the same approach broke its pattern and leaned toward a different part of the line. I looked for the cause. A figure farther back in the hostile movement had shifted position. "Is less than #0. 4# is greater than." I could not hear what Emil said or know what passed between him and the men closer to us. I only saw the sequence. Pressure held one shape. Emil intervened. Pressure took another. "Did you see that?" I asked. Halden answered over the radio. "See what?" "They changed after Emil moved." "Useful." "Maybe." "Then keep it at maybe." The new angle forced another adjustment. I sent one pair across the rear of the corner and pulled another group inward before the gap widened. My legs felt heavy, and the ringing in my ears had settled into a thin, constant note. We kept the corner. We did not get the outer ground back. That distinction mattered more with every minute. Halden returned to our channel between 2 orders meant for somebody else. Status: line is connected, smaller than it was. Reserve: still untouched. Wing: I looked beyond the visible assault and found the same absence that had bothered me from the start. Nothing. Halden was quiet for half a beat. Then Emil is still choosing to fight without it. Yes. Does that tell you why? No. So, what did we actually gain? Halden asked. The line stayed connected. And the ground. And still gone. The reserve. Still untouched. The wing. Still absent. He let that sit for a moment. Then you saved the corner. I saved the corner. Not the battle. No. That answer bothered me because it was exactly right. We were tired, compressed, and still reacting to Emil. And the part of his force that could have changed the whole shape of the fight remained absent. The line held, but only because we kept moving inside it. I left the inner corner with 2 defenders and crossed behind the shortened position while the hardpoint took another heavy push. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. The ringing in my ears had faded enough to let individual sounds separate again. Boots striking concrete, short radio calls, the blunt concussion of pressure against the front. The wing was still absent. That absence had stopped being a curiosity. It was becoming a decision problem. Halden met me near a broken service wall without leaving his radio net. You're moving again. I need to see whether the pressure changes with us. You already saw Emil change it once. I saw sequence. I didn't see cause. That distinction is costing us room. I know. He looked toward the hard point. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than make it useful. We moved before the next push fully developed. The defenders behind us shifted to close what we left, and that alone told me how little flexibility remained. Every relocation now borrowed space from somewhere else. Emil's visible assault stayed aggressive. It was not theater. Men were still pressing against real positions, and Halden still had to answer real losses. One explanation was simple. Emil wanted the hard point and was holding the wing for the moment when the defense finally cracked. Another was that the visible assault covered a separate move we had not seen yet. There was a third possibility I could not dismiss, but I had nothing clean enough to name as fact. A hostile element changed direction across the frontage. I stopped behind a low concrete barrier. Halden, I see it. Did Emil move before they changed? A pause. Yes. The hostile pressure folded toward the section we had just reinforced. Halden said, second time. Second observation. You want 3. I want something that can fail. That sounds expensive. It will be. We moved again, this time toward the side of the hard point that had carried less pressure during the last exchange. A defender beside me glanced toward outer pavement we had abandoned. I kept him moving. Recovering old ground would have answered the wrong question and spent the freedom the test required. Visibility came and went with dust. My legs felt slower than they had an hour earlier, though I did not know how long the fight had actually been running. Exact time mattered less than the direction of the clock. Dawn was still coming. Halden caught up long enough to stand beside me. What are you testing? If Emil is holding the wing to exploit a real opening at the hardpoint, then we give him one. How much of 1 is less than #0? 4# is greater than enough to see. That is not a number. It shouldn't be. I want a side thin enough to look worth reinforcing, not thin enough to collapse before we can react. And if your read is wrong, then we spend positional flexibility for nothing. Nothing is the cheap version. I looked at the line. If I'm wrong badly, the visible assault can use the opening itself. That's the price I wanted to hear. I nodded. He studied the same section I was watching. What do you expect to happen? The missing wing should move toward the thin side. Should, if my current model is right. And if it doesn't, then the model loses weight. Not the enemy. No. Another concussion shook grit, loose from the wall behind us. Halden raised the radio. I'll allow the test. Bounded. We keep enough depth to stop a break. That's all I need. No, June. That's all I'm giving you. Understood. He began shifting his attention back to the wider fight while I moved with the defenders who would create the opening. Nobody looked pleased. Nobody needed to. We did not announce what we were doing. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. We simply redistributed enough strength that one side of the hardpoint became visibly thinner than it had been. The cost appeared immediately. The remaining line tightened elsewhere. One pair lost the freedom to reposition. Halden's reserve stayed thin and untouched, but our room to change shape got smaller. I watched Emil's pressure. It changed again after he intervened, but not enough to answer the question. The wing did not move. Not yet. Window is open, Halden said. I see it. You still expect the wing? Yes. You still calling that a fact? No. Good. We held the thinner side, exactly where we had chosen it. The prediction was now exposed to the only thing that mattered. What Emil did next. The test began with less movement than I expected. We had already thinned the selected side. Now we had to live inside the choice long enough for Emil to answer it. I stayed near the service wall, where I could watch the pressure, without pretending I could see the whole field. Halden remained on the radio, tracking problems that had nothing to do with proving my model. Window is still open, he said. I know. Wing. Nothing. Halden came back. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than June. If I keep this open, tell me what you are watching for. The wing moving toward us. And if the assault increases, then I treat that as pressure, not proof. You are asking me to hold weakness for a prediction. Yes. How certain are you? Not certain enough to call it fact. Then be ready to close the window. I am. I checked the thin side. Nothing beyond the visible assault had shifted. The visible assault pressed again. I waited for movement beyond it. Nothing came. A defender near me looked over his shoulder. How long do we hold this? Until the enemy answers or the opening gets too expensive. That sounds like two different clocks. It is. The next push hit the thin side harder. For 1 second I thought that was the answer. Then I saw who was moving. Not the wing. The same assault element already in front of us drove into the space we had created. Halden, they're taking the opening. I see it. The wing still hasn't moved. Then close it. We tried. The problem was that we had created the weakness ourselves. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than. The people who could have sealed it immediately were the people we had shifted away to make the test visible. They were still close, but close was no longer the same as available. The hostile pressure pushed through faster than we could restore the shape. Service side is bending, someone called. Move the rear pair across, I said. They're pinned to the inner corner. Then do not pull them loose. Halden cut in. June, I can spend one reserve element. I looked at the gap, then at the shrinking space behind it. If you don't, we lose more than the bay. That's not what I asked. Spend it. He gave the order. The reserve element that had survived everything before this moved toward the breach. It did not recover the position. It stopped the loss from spreading. That distinction was mine to own. The service bay disappeared from our control in fragments. First the approach, then the near wall, then the last piece of cover that let anyone pretend we still possessed it. The defenders fell back to the next usable line. I went with them. The wing never arrived. My forecast had been simple enough to test and wrong enough to hurt. I was wrong, I said. Halden did not answer immediately. Is less than #0. 4# is greater than he was giving directions somewhere else, closing the damage I had helped create. When he came back to me, his voice was flat. Wrong about what? The trigger. I expected the missing wing to exploit the thin side. It didn't. No. What did? Emil used the force already in contact. And what did that cost? Service bay. 1 reserve element. More room. That's the record. No accusation. No comfort either. Another impact shook the line. A defender crouched beside us and said, "Do we take the bay back?" Halden answered, "No." The man looked at me. "He's right," I said. We stopped the next loss. He moved away without comment. I kept watching the hard point. Emile had not needed the wing to punish the test. His visible assault had been strong enough, disciplined enough, and close enough to use the opening on its own. That did not tell me what the wing was for. It only removed one reason I had believed it would move. Halden said, "What do you have left?" "Observations." "Not a theory?" "Not one I'd ask you to spend on." "Good." The reserve was thinner now, in a way that could not be argued away. The service bay was gone. Our position had contracted again. I felt the weight of the mistake in the shape of the ground, not in anyone's opinion of me. Then a report broke across the radio. "Movement. Hostile mobile element." I turned toward the sound of the call. "Where?" "Not here." Halden looked at me. The missing wing was finally moving. Just not where I had said it would. The report came again, before I could ask for more. Mobile element crossing east. Destination, launch lane. That answered the first question, and made the rest worse. The hard point was still under pressure behind us. I could hear the difference now, one fight beating against concrete in front of the defenders, another opening farther away with a harsher, scattered rhythm. Nothing about the wing's movement made Emile's visible assault less dangerous. Halden turned toward the launch side. "We need one lane alive. We need enough support to use it." "I know." He was already moving people without stripping the hard point. That was the problem. The hard point still demanded real force. A call from the launch side reported damage to a support position and shrinking movement space. Another voice added that both reconnaissance aircraft were still on the ground. Halden answered, "Keep one lane usable. Don't spend people protecting dead space." I moved toward the sound of the second fight and stopped where I could see the edge of the launch area. The mobile wing was there. Not reinforcing Emile's hardpoint assault. Not drifting. Working against the function we needed before dawn. A vehicle burned near the support area. I did not need to know what had struck it. The consequence was enough. People who had been moving between the aircraft and the lane were forced farther inward. "June, tell me what changed." "The wing has a real target." "That part is obvious." The hardpoint didn't relax when the wing moved. Another impact rolled through the hardpoint behind us. Halden looked past me. "Meaning?" If this were only a hidden second strike, Emile could let the first fight lose weight once the wing committed. But he isn't. No. A defender called for more bodies on the launch side. Halden gave him one pair and refused more. Losing the outer strip was acceptable now. Losing the last usable lane was not. I watched the two fights pull at the same finite defense. The hardpoint forced Halden to keep people tied there. The mobile wing punished every person he could not move. That relationship was different from concealment. The first attack was helping the second attack work. "I was wrong about the trigger," I said. Halden glanced at me. "This isn't that test again." "No. What I have now is different." "Then give me only what the evidence supports." "The hardpoint pressure is keeping us committed while the wing hits the launch lane." "What proves it?" I pointed to the choice Emile was still making. His visible assault kept consuming effort after the wing committed. If the second strike were merely independent and hidden, the hardpoint fight could lose weight once concealment had served its purpose. Instead, pressure there remained strong enough that Halden could not safely strip it. A new radio call reported that launch support had been reduced to the minimum needed to keep movement possible. If the inner side failed, both aircraft would stay grounded. Halden keyed back. "Forget estimates. Tell me what you can still keep." "One lane," the reply came. "Maybe?" "Keep it." The mobile wing pressed deeper toward the launch function. Another support vehicle was abandoned. People near it fell behind surviving cover rather than hold useless ground. The cost was no longer abstract. If both reconnaissance aircraft stayed on the ground until dawn, Emile did not need to capture the hardpoint. He did not need the airfield. He only needed the clock to expire. Halden asked, "How much of this depends on Emile personally?" "I don't know." "You saw him redirect pressure twice." "I saw behavior. I don't have the rule." "Keep that distinction." "I will." That mattered. I had already paid for turning a pattern into a prediction too quickly. This time I had something stronger, but not everything. The launch attack changed the value of what we were defending. The old waiting toward the hardpoint would now lose the mission. Yet stripping the hardpoint could give Emile a collapse he had been trying to buy all night. Halden did not need that explained twice. "So what are you asking for?" "One diversion." His expression did not change. "One move," I said. "Not command." "What does it buy?" "A chance to break the relationship between the two pressures." "And the cost?" "I have to commit the mobile asset. It becomes exposed. If the relationship I'm seeing is weaker than I think, we spend that option and gain nothing." He looked from the launch side back toward the hardpoint. Another report came in. Pressure was increasing near the inner launch support. Halden ordered them to preserve the lane, then faced me again. "You're asking me to spend on a model you rebuilt one scene after it failed?" "Yes." "And you're still not calling it certainty?" "No." "What are you calling it?" "Enough evidence for one bounded move." The hardpoint was still active. The mobile wing was still attacking the launch lane. Both aircraft were still on the ground. Halden had not authorized anything yet. I had put exactly one diversion in front of him. Halden did not answer immediately. The launch side called for help again. He gave them enough to keep the inner lane from folding and nothing more. At the hardpoint, Emile's visible assault was still pressing hard enough to punish any careless shift. Then Halden looked at me. "One diversion. Tell me the cost again." "The mobile asset has to commit far enough to matter." "And?" "It becomes exposed." "And?" "It may only dislocate the pressure. It may not solve anything beyond that." He nodded once. "Good." I pointed toward the open apron between the hardpoint pressure and the launch side. "If we create movement Emile has to answer personally, we may pull his attention and command element away from the wing." "May." "Yes." "You still don't know how dependent the wing is on him." "No." "Then your objective is not to prove that." "No. The objective is to break the relationship long enough to change the fight." Halden looked toward the launch lane. Another dull series of impacts rolled across the field from that direction. "What happens to my hardpoint if this fails?" "It stays under pressure." "It already is." "And I've spent our mobile option." "Correct." "What happens to the aircraft?" "They stay at risk." "So I pay the option without buying certainty." "Yes." Halden keyed his radio, gave 2 short orders to the hardpoint, then another to the launch side. He was still commanding the whole field. Nothing about my request changed that. When he lowered the handset, he said, One maneuver decision. Yours. Nothing beyond it. Understood. Execute. I moved to the mobility asset and committed it. My legs felt heavy from the earlier fighting, and every correction across the apron reminded me that the asset was spending distance we might need badly later. The open apron made every meter feel public. The diversion had to become a problem Emil could not ignore. The asset moved. Defenders attached to the action shifted with it, not toward the launch lane and not into a broad counterattack against the hardpoint. We changed the pressure on the space Emil had been using to keep his visible assault and mobile wing mutually useful. Halden's voice came over the radio. Hardpoint unchanged. Launch side? Wing still engaged. I watched for Emil. A hostile element near the hardpoint adjusted, but only locally. Then another section shifted. The changes did not release the launch lane. Not enough, Halden said. Not yet. You have one move. June, you do not get a second version of it. I know. I kept the asset committed. Pulling it back would preserve the asset, but erase the effect before we knew whether Emil cared. Keeping it exposed meant accepting the cost I had already named. The hardpoint pressure changed again. This time the change spread farther than the earlier local adjustments. Emil moved, I said. Halden answered, I see him. His command element began shifting toward our side of the fight. The mobile wing did not follow. It stayed near the launch lane, still applying pressure there. For the first time, the two hostile efforts stopped feeling like parts of one body moving together. The hardpoint assault continued. The wing continued. But the distance between Emil's immediate position and the wing began to grow. A defender with me said, "They're turning toward us." Yes. Is that what we wanted? It's what we asked to provoke. That wasn't my question. No, it isn't good yet. Emil's side of the fight tightened against the diversion. Our asset was now fully visible as the thing changing his problem. Halden called, "Launch lane reports a small reduction in coordinated pressure." Reduction or collapse? Reduction. Keep it at that. What? You sound disappointed. I'm trying not to invent the rest. That would be a welcome habit. I almost laughed, but another impact across the apron killed the impulse. The diversion kept working. Emil was being pulled toward me. His command element followed his physical shift. The wing remained engaged near the launch lane instead of reconnecting with him. That separation was not victory. The hardpoint still existed as a live fight. The wing was still dangerous. Both aircraft were still waiting on a lane that had almost no margin left. But hostile pressure was no longer perfectly synchronized. Halden said, "You changed the relationship." For now. What did it cost? I looked at the asset sitting exposed in the open problem I had created. It gave Emil something he can hit. As if he had heard me, the hostile movement on our side deepened. Not random pressure. A response. Emil was no longer merely adjusting from a distance. He was committing toward the diversion. Halden's voice sharpened. "June. I see it. Your asset is exposed. I know. You still have room to disengage." For a second, that was true. Then Emil's movement closed more of that room. I watched the distance change and understood the part that mattered, without pretending I understood everything else. The diversion had worked enough to split the problem. It had also made us the problem Emil was coming to solve. Emil came for the asset before I could reconsider exposing it. The hostile pressure on our side tightened from two directions. Not wider. Smarter. One element held us in place, while another shifted across the apron to cut off the easy withdrawal I still had earlier. Halden's voice came over the radio. "June, disengage if you can. If I pull now, the split closes. That is not the same as saying you cannot pull." "No." "Then choose with your eyes open." I kept the asset committed. "The left side just changed," a defender said. "I see it. Leave that cover. It's better than the next position. It's also tying you to the asset. Move." Another man shouted, "I'm crossing." "Go now. Pressure's closing behind me. Keep moving. Do not stop there." Emil had read what mattered. He was not chasing us for revenge. He was attacking the thing that had forced him away from the wing. "Pressure shifting again," I said. Halden answered, "Launch lane still active. Wing has not followed him. That's why he's here. Do not make that more certain than it is." "I'm not." "We have nowhere to hide the asset," the driver said. "Then don't hide it. Keep moving. Every correction opens another side." "I know. If we save the machine by pulling out, we lose the separation." "Yes. And if we stay too long? We lose the machine before the separation matters. So what am I buying? Time, nothing more." A hard impact slammed through the asset's side. Heat washed across the open space. The driver looked at me. "We can still move." "Then move enough to keep them split." "Back?" "Not yet." The next hostile shift came faster. Emil's command element was closer now. The mobile wing remained near the launch lane, still dangerous, still forcing Halden to keep defenders there. Our advantage was becoming the distance between Emil and that wing. The asset took another hit. This one changed the sound of it. The engine note broke. Movement became uneven. "June," Halden said. "I know. You are running out of machine. I still have position." "For how long?" "Long enough to matter." A defender shouted that the right side was collapsing toward us. I moved 2 people off the asset and across the rear of the position before they became trapped with it. We gave up a narrow strip of apron, but kept the hostile pressure from folding around both sides at once. Emil adjusted again. He stopped feeding pressure directly into the damaged asset and pushed one element toward the defenders covering its rear. That was the better choice. If he broke them, the asset would not need to be destroyed. We would have to abandon it ourselves. "Rear pair, move," I said. "Where?" "Inside. Keep the gap open." "We leave the asset?" "We keep the separation." The words hurt more than I expected. Halden heard them. "That is the correct priority." "I know. You do not sound convinced." "I'm convinced." Another impact cut across the apron. The asset lurched. The remaining movement died. No dramatic explosion. No clean ending. The machine simply stopped answering the purpose I had preserved it for since the opening fight. The driver climbed free and dropped behind the nearest cover. "Mobility is gone," he said. I looked at the dead asset, then at Emil's side of the fight. "No replacement," I said. Halden answered immediately. "None." That closed the question. We were fixed now. Emil had destroyed the one thing that let me change the shape of the field quickly. But he had paid for it by coming farther toward our side while the mobile wing stayed near the launch lane. Separation remained. A report from the launch side came in, broken and fast. The wing was still fighting. It had not collapsed, but its pressure was less fluid than before. One element kept pushing the same task after the situation around it had changed. Halden heard the same thing. "They're still dangerous," he said. "Yes. They're also slower to change." "Yes. Do not call that dependence yet." "I won't." The defenders around me had nowhere clean to go. We shifted on foot around the wreck, keeping just enough space between positions to stop Emil from turning one destroyed asset into a collapse of the local line. The dead asset radiated heat beside us. I could smell burned material and dust. My legs were heavy, and my breathing had stopped feeling automatic. Emil's command element was still on our side. That mattered more than the wreck at my feet. A defender asked, "Can we pull back now?" "If we open the distance, he gets room to reconnect." "So we stay?" "For now." Halden cut in. "June, look toward the outer vehicle bay." I did. It sat beyond the open apron, still holding the last useful cluster of spare transports. "What about it?" "If I keep Emil separated, I may have to give that up." "The whole bay?" "And the transports." I watched the space between Emil and the mobile wing. The line was ugly, but readable. If Halden filled that open apron with enough physical obstruction and defenders, Emil would lose the easy way back. It would also destroy what little flexible movement the airfield still had. "That is not my decision," I said. "No. You're asking whether the cost matches the problem. I'm telling you what the next problem costs." The wing hit launch site again. Emil stayed with us. The separation survived. So did the danger. I put one hand against the warm concrete and forced my breathing down. My mobility asset was gone. Nothing in the field was going to give it back. Halden still had one larger choice left, and it was going to cost him almost everything we still had that could move. The mobility asset was still burning behind me when the mobile wing hit the launch site again. Its pressure had changed. It was still dangerous, still organized enough to keep defenders pinned to the surviving lane, but the adjustments came slower now. Emil was on our side of the separation, and the wing kept fighting the task it already had. Halden came over the radio. "June, status. Fixed in place. Emil? Still this side. Wing? Still on the launch function." A pause. "Then I'm closing the gap." I looked toward the outer vehicle bay. "You mean the bay?" "I mean the bay and the spare transports. That removes almost everything we have left for movement." "Yes. That is your call." "I know." His answer came without drama. He started giving orders before I could say anything else. The outer vehicle bay had survived by being useful and slightly removed from the worst pressure. That ended now. Defenders shifted toward it, while the remaining spare transports moved out of their protected positions and onto the open apron. They were not creating a clever route. They were taking one away. Halden used the vehicles, people, and space we still controlled to make the open apron too occupied and too contested for Emil to reconnect with the wing without physically crossing back through us. The cost appeared as soon as the move began. The loss of the bay narrowed our future even further. If this failed, Halden had almost nothing left that could shift fast. One transport was abandoned where it blocked movement. Another stopped after taking damage and stayed where it was. The bay itself stopped functioning as a reserve of future mobility and became part of the line. Halden said, "Outer vehicle bay is gone." "Understood." "Spare transports too." "I see them." "You disagree?" "No." "You sound like you do." "I sound tired." "That I believe." The exchange ended there. No reassurance. No ceremony. The wing hit the launch site again. The pressure was real enough that Halden had to shift attention away from us for several seconds. I used those seconds to move on foot around the dead mobility asset and find the narrow area where Emil's side of the fight pressed closest to the blocked apron. My legs objected to every step. A defender beside me said, "What do you want us holding?" "This contact." "For how long?" "Until Emil chooses something else." "And if he comes through us?" "Then we make the crossing cost him time." He looked toward the apron, filled with the vehicles Halden had just sacrificed. "So there's no other way back?" "There may be possibilities I can't see. The practical one in front of us is closed." That was the unknown I could live with. I did not know exactly how much adaptive control the wing could recover without Emil physically rejoining it. I knew what I could observe. The wing continued its assigned fight. Its local pressure remained capable. Its larger changes had become slower after Emil separated from it. That was enough to make the next decision without pretending it was enough to explain the entire system. Halden came back. "June, I can move you off that contact." "With what?" "I can strip people from somewhere else." "That is not mobility. That is another loss." "It is still an option." "No." "You're declining reinforcement?" "I'm declining broader authority over the field. Keep your people where the mission needs them." "And you?" "I stay here." "Why?" "Emil still needs the wing to change with him." "You don't know how much." "No." "Then say the unknown." "I don't know how much control the wing can recover without him physically reconnecting." "And you're staying anyway?" "Yes." Halden was silent for a beat. "Then I'll hold the wider separation." "That's your job. And this contact is yours." For now. The blocked apron changed the fight without ending it. The mobile wing still attacked near the launch lane. The hardpoint still demanded defenders. The aircraft were still waiting for enough surviving function to get airborne before dawn. But Emil could no longer move back toward the wing by the easiest practical line. He would have to cross contested space. He would have to come through the contact I was holding. A defender near me asked, "You think he'll do it?" "I think the clock makes staying separated expensive." That isn't an answer. It's the only one I have. Across the apron, Emil's movement changed. His people stopped deepening pressure around the wrecked asset. They began orienting back toward the blocked connection. Halden saw it too. "He's turning." "Yes?" "Toward the wing. Toward the connection." "You staying?" "Yes." The defender beside me tightened his grip on the edge of the concrete. The mobile wing struck the launch side again, still dangerous, still fighting. Emil could leave it that way and watch his raid lose flexibility as the departure window closed. Or he could restore the relationship himself. His movement answered before any theory did. He started back toward us. I stayed where the crossing had to become contested. Emil came back through the noise without slowing. The distance between us started disappearing. I stayed at the contested contact because there was nowhere useful to move the problem. Behind me, Halden's containment held the apron with abandoned transports, damaged vehicles, and defenders who had already paid for the ground they occupied. Beyond that, the mobile wing was still pressing the launch side. Halden's voice cut through my narrowed hearing. "Wing is pushing the apron. Can you hold it?" "For now." "That's all I need." Emil kept coming. Its command element moved with him around one purpose: restore the physical connection the diversion had broken. A defender beside me said, "We can fall back 20 meters. That gives him 20 meters. It also gives us room." "I know." Another report came from Halden. Wing shifted again, They're testing the containment. Still local? Still dangerous. Keep them off him. That is what I am doing. The defender looked at me. And what are we doing? Making Emile solve us first. The first collision of pressure drove us backward anyway. Not far. Enough. My boots slipped on grit. My left shoulder hit hard concrete, and for a moment, the sound of the field collapsed into one flat note. Emile used that moment. He changed the problem instead of repeating it. His people stopped pressing straight through the contact and leaned against the side that gave me the cleaner withdrawal. The safe spacing I had kept behind us started disappearing. He's closing the exit, the defender said. Yes. Then we use it now. I looked behind me. The withdrawal was still there. If we took it, Emile would gain the contested strip and a cleaner approach toward the blocked apron. Halden would still have containment, but the distance he had bought would shrink. June, Halden said, I still have a way out. Take it if the contact is gone. It isn't gone. That was not permission. I know. Emile hit us again. The defender beside me stumbled back. I shifted with him to keep Emile from stepping through the contact uncontested. My legs had no reserve left. Every movement felt borrowed. A call broke over Halden's channel. Wing pressure increasing. Halden answered someone else first, then came back to me. I'm spending people to keep them separated. I can see that. Then make the contact worth it. I'm trying. No. Decide whether it still is. The safer spacing behind me was still open enough to use. I gave it up. Hold here, I said. The defender stared at me. Here? Here. That closes our exit. Yes. He swore once and stayed. Emile adapted again. He had expected us to withdraw into the room he was taking away. When we did not, his pressure compressed instead of widening. The confrontation became shorter and harder to read. He still had more physical energy than I did. I could feel it. He drove me off balance once, then again. The second time I caught myself on one knee. The defender moved to help. Stay on the contact, I said. You're down. I'm getting up. You're slow. I noticed. June, his people are widening behind him. Then don't follow me. Hold them. Halden came through the radio. Wing is pressing my containment. Can they reach Emile? Not without coming through what I already spent. Hold that. I am holding it, you hold him. The defender glanced toward the blocked apron. They're trying to push from the launch side too. Halden has it. You sure? No. I heard him say he has it. That's enough? It has to be. Halden said, Wing cannot reach him from my side. Then I keep him from yours. Emile changed again. Instead of forcing directly toward the apron, he turned pressure onto me. That made sense. I had become the narrowest piece of the separation. The defender beside me shouted, June, move. There was space to my right. Not much. Enough for me to recover distance and make the contact safer. If I took it, Emile would gain the line he needed to keep advancing. I stayed. The next impact took my breath. I hit the ground on one hand and tasted blood. For a second, the field reduced itself to breathing. In. Nothing useful. Out. Move. I got 1 foot under me. Emile was already adjusting for my slower recovery. That was his last good read. He expected exhaustion to make me protect myself first. I did not. I gave up the last safe step between us and closed the distance before he could turn my fatigue into another clean advance. There was no elegant exchange. Balance changed. Pressure changed. He tried to recover the line toward the apron. I stayed between him and it. He shifted again, trying to turn past me instead of through me. I used the movement he gave me and forced the struggle back onto the hard surface. My arms felt heavy. My hearing narrowed again. Emil was still dangerous. He nearly broke past me once. I caught the movement late and gave up another piece of balance to stop it. Halden's voice came through. June, wing is fracturing against the containment. Not finished? I know. Emil made one last attempt to clear me. He had enough strength to make it real. I had enough position left to make it fail. I held him there, absorbed the cost, and turned his final drive away from the connection. He went down hard. He tried to rise. I stayed on him long enough to stop that from becoming another attempt. When he could no longer continue the fight or restore the connection, I backed away. That was the end of Emil's command function. Not the end of the field. The change reached the mobile wing almost immediately. Its pressure did not vanish. It broke into pieces. One element kept attacking the launch side. Another stalled against Halden's containment. A third shifted without the same timing that had made the earlier pressure feel like one coordinated hand. Halden heard it too. June. I'm here. Emil? Neutralized. A pause. Then Halden was already working the field again. Launch side, report minimum function. I sat against the concrete because standing had stopped being useful. My chest burned with every breath, and the muscles in both legs shook when I tried to straighten them. I stayed down long enough to hear the field change around me. My hands were shaking. The destroyed mobility asset was still behind us. The service bay was still gone. The vehicle bay and spare transports were still part of Halden's containment instead of future options. Nothing had repaired itself because Emil was down. The wing remained locally dangerous, but the adaptive pressure that had kept changing faster than we could answer it was gone. Halden's defenders began pushing surviving attention back toward the mission. The two reconnaissance aircraft were still on the ground. The clock had not stopped for the climax. Neither could we. The field did not become quiet after Emil went down. It became less coordinated. That difference was enough. The mobile wing still produced scattered pressure near the launch side, but it no longer changed tasks with the speed that had kept Halden pinned between two collapsing problems. His defenders contained what remained while everyone else worked around damage instead of pretending the airfield was whole. I got back on my feet because sitting had become a luxury. The walk toward the launch lane hurt more than the fight had. My legs had stiffened, and every step reminded me that the mobility asset was gone for good. The service bay was still lost. The outer vehicle bay was gone. The spare transports remained where Halden had spent them to block the apron. Nothing useful had returned, simply because the organized threat had broken. A voice from the launch side called that one lane remained usable. Another report followed. Enough support function remained to move both reconnaissance aircraft. That was the only number that mattered anymore. Halden was already there, directing people away from dead space and toward the minimum work that still had to happen. He did not stop when I reached him. One lane? I asked. One? Both aircraft? If we keep it alive, then keep it alive. That was the plan. It was the only exchange we needed. The surviving defenders held the damaged edge of the launch function while the last organized hostile pressure dissolved into local resistance that no longer changed the whole field. No one chased a clean victory. There was no clean field left to win. The first reconnaissance aircraft began moving. I stood far enough away to stay out of the work, and close enough to see what we had bought. Its engines rose above the broken noise of the airfield. The aircraft accelerated along the surviving lane and lifted before dawn. Nobody cheered. There was still another aircraft on the ground. The remaining support crews reset only what had to be reset. Damaged equipment stayed damaged. Lost space stayed lost. Halden kept moving between positions. Still commander, still spending attention where it mattered. The second aircraft started forward. For a moment, the surviving lane looked impossibly narrow against everything around it that no longer worked. Then the aircraft committed to it. It accelerated past the damaged service side, past the empty space where flexible vehicles should have been, and lifted into the dark before the horizon could brighten enough to end the window. Both were airborne. The mission had survived in the smallest form that counted. The airfield had not. Its future capacity was visibly reduced. The service bay remained unusable. The outer vehicle bay was gone. The spare transports were no longer available. My mobility asset sat destroyed behind the containment line. Halden kept commanding. I had nothing new to command. The coordinated firing had thinned to isolated noise behind us, contained enough away that the launch crews could keep working. A defender near the launch side needed help moving debris clear of the usable lane. I walked over. My hands still shook when I bent down, so I changed my grip and kept working. There was another piece beside my boot. I picked it up and carried it off